April 2nd special meeting of the Village of Franklin Council. We are not doing a roll call or a specific agenda, so Meg, I'll hand over to you to let you decide in what order you want to handle things.
Sounds good. So today, this was one of two budget meetings that we had scheduled. The purpose of the meeting is to allow space for council and myself and staff to discuss budget allocations for this upcoming year. We're not making any final decisions today. It's a workshop. We're just talking through. Initially, when this was scheduled, the priority was to talk about the proposed police budget. It makes up a large portion of our budget in total, and it's worth having some time just to look at it specially here. We've become more comfortable with the police budget. We've talked about it a lot, so depending on time, once we've moved through questions that we may have on the proposed police budget, we'll go ahead and cut Chief loose and let him off the hook here, and then have just broader budget discussion in general. We can talk about specific budget priorities that anyone may have, questions that you might have I'm going to be able to answer. Again, today's not your last day to engage and to work through that. We will meet again before our regularly scheduled meeting on April 14th. So you have two supporting documents today in front of you. One is just a copy of this budget that we're currently operating off in whole. And the other one is separated out just the police funds. In the police budget, we've looked at the last 3 years and this coming year to provide a little bit of an analysis. You can benchmark and see where we've been over time. Chief and I are prepared to answer any questions about the specifics. If you have questions about where those numbers came from or where they're at, we can go ahead and give you all of that information here. Most of the budget is pretty consistent. It is laid out a little different. One of the things I'll draw your attention to right away is on your police budget for contracts, contractual service, which is on page 3 of 4, and it's in a green text box. You'll see that last year and this proposed budget, the difference is a lot. The reason isn't necessarily in the change in contractual services, it's for cleaner accounting. Chief and I had talked a lot about the structure of the actual PD accounts. And so one of the changes that we're making is that this year and moving forward, our contractual services will be shown together in an account. Makes it easier for us to analyze what we're doing in contractual services instead of having them spread out over multiple accounts. So we can go ahead and answer any questions that you have here. That's one of our main changes. After your questions, I'll have Chief give you a couple of his highlights, and then we can go from there.
So, just a couple of things. Do we have okay, so budgets. Is there any line item on here that's is the top one? Well, no, that's salaries. Do we have the aggregated budget for the police?
Wouldn't that be over here?
No, because the one you're looking at right there, David, is just the 2024, 2025. There's not a projection of 25, 26 on the blue.
Right.
This is the one that has the projection.
Yeah, so are you looking for a total amount?
Yeah.
So on my figures here, I have this year that we would come in at 2 million, around 2,500,000. I can see that your 24-25 budget came in at 2,396,000 after it was amended.
David, were you talking about the PD aggregated budget?
Yes.
The 2.5 million?
I think it's both. Is the 2.5 village and PD or just PD?
Village and PD.
Is 2.5.
So what is could we just get just PDs aggregated?
No, I'm sorry, that's what I have for just the PD,
Yeah,
Fund
correct.
207, for expenditures, is about 2.5.
Okay. And then last year, with the amended budget was,
2513?
Yeah,
seeing that. I'm on page 9 of 17. And
Okay.
then we have the estimated revenues, appropriations, and it looks like the appropriations are 2,634,290.
Right, but there's a balance. Isn't the prior page, the bottom line of that 2,513,570, isn't that the amended budget at the end of page 8? And then the next items are capital expenditures, and then the transfer in is the portion that,
Bingham Farms and other,
estimated revenues are 2,634, but then there's a net out. And a, what's the fund balance? Is that just for emergencies?
yeah,
So I don't know, David, it's either 2,634 or 2,513. I'm not very good at these.
You're fine.
Because, again, I'm just trying to start the baseline conversation at is like, where are we at with this budget comparatively to where we've previously been?
it's about a 5% rough increase to the previous budget. Again, this is just working budget, it's not a final budget,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
are no final numbers yet. But so far, what I'm looking at is about a 5% increase.
Okay. Yeah, I also am not good with this. As far as like just trying to figure out where it's at, because again, if the last one was the number that you were looking at, David, which is on page 8 of 17, that would indicate an ending balance last year of the 2,513,570. But then there's additional expenditures under capital expenditures, I believe, directly for the police. That would then bring it to
Yeah.
2634.
Yeah, so that's the
So it
number.
seems like there would actually be a decrease.
Well, the 2.5 right now for you is just an
An
estimate of
estimate,
where
and
we
we
were at.
anticipate that it'll probably be about
Yes,
5%.
in general, my anticipation
Yeah.
is when we get those numbers honed into where they'll be, I
Mm-hmm.
think we're gonna shake out to about a 5% increase in just the PD budget.
Okay. And then, were there any major, the other thing too is just the way it printed for me, and I just assume that this is, clerical salaries appeared
Yes.
twice.
Oh, should just be once,
So on the first page, it's the bottom line.
Yep.
And then I found it identical on the second page in blue, like,
About halfway through.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, so that's
Okay.
my error.
No, you're
It's on
good, you're
here
good. I just
twice.
wanted, I was like, just double checking everything.
Not added twice into
Yep.
the figures that I'm using.
Yeah.
And when I go back and edit this document, I'll remove the one from the second page because I think it makes more sense on the first page. That's where we're talking about other payroll costs and salaries.
Okay. And then some of the things that I noted in here was in a lot of areas, our 24, 25 percentage increases jumped dramatically. So if you look at like holiday pay, it went from 9% to 40, almost 42%.
Yeah,
Payroll taxes went from 2.8 to 19.
yep.
What were some of the reasons for those dramatic increases?
Those are really, they're all the same reason. And that came at the cost of taking the part-time positions and making them full-time.
Got it.
Part-time positions don't accrue the overtime, they're not getting paid out for the holidays, we're paying less in payroll taxes. So adding those positions, which was approved during the budget amendment that happened in December, January time, changed and caused those dramatic increases that you see there.
Because I asked about this during the finance committee
Yes.
meeting where we were talking about the PD budget. I'm still not completely, and maybe Chief, you can help with this. I'm not completely, clear or settled, but with regards to the explanation, I might have been, just thinking back on the presentations that Chief Roberts gave us when he was contemplating this change, he asked for council input. And my recollection is this business case was, it will help with street coverage, it will help with cost management, even though certain items would go up, like pension, because we're assuming those. But I noticed that budgeted overtime hasn't gone down. I would have wondered if overtime would have gone down. Bottom line, my question is, from a management point of view, why is it better for us to have 12 or 13 full-time people versus a combination of full and part-time? Because the budget numbers don't seem to support that. So what's the compelling reason?
So having full-time people is gonna be more expensive. The idea for me, and I did push this quite a bit with Chief Roberts, is I did want to move to all full-time because I want consistency in training. I don't want people that come to work once a month and maybe have trained a couple of times a year. I know across the board what everyone's doing, how everyone's training. We're all trained the same. They have interactions with me on a daily basis. And I think that consistency is a better product for the community, and I also think it reduces liability.
The other thing is that those part-time positions became hard to fill. And with those being hard to fill, and we have them, they're not filled, that was putting a strain on overtime. And as we thought long-term strategic planning for the department, to continue to have to rely on our full-time individuals accruing more and more overtime to cover the fact that these part-time shifts we just can't keep kind of consistently filled, I believe that was part of the rationale. Now, that wasn't part of those conversations, would have came in after that. Ideally, honestly, those changes, and there was a bit of a breakdown of information, those changes probably should have been just reflected in your budget that you adopted last year. Now, I can't attest to what the process was there, but for whatever reason, they didn't make it there, so they didn't show reflected in your budget until you got into December, and now we're seeing those increases kind of, they feel like they came out of nowhere. But these should have been conversations that we were having last year around budget time when we were getting rid of the part-time positions and moving to full-time.
So here's another completely and totally unfair question, but
Okay,
I'm
I'm
gonna
ready.
ask it. Because again, we all travel in the community, and my question really is, Chief, if we were to ask you to reduce your budget, and we've never asked the PD to do that I can think of, but let's say we needed to, where would you reduce your budget?
I mean, really, I would think that a majority of your costs are with personnel. So if the board mandated or asked me that, you have to reduce your budget, it's gonna be manpower. This is really a zero-based budget. Everything that I have put in here is accounted for. The only thing that is miscellaneous expenses and police supplies, which is $2,300. That means over a period of 12 months, there's $2,300 to buy something that I didn't account for already, right? So it's a very low amount. So I feel like Meg and I really drilled down and tried to give you guys a responsible budget here. But if you're looking at saving a couple $100,000, then you're talking about an officer position.
If you were asked to justify, so the increases, and I totally understand the flip to full-time hiring and the reasons for that, but if you had to justify, if someone were pressing you to show the ROI on that investment of hiring those full-time officers, are there any reductions in the amount of, I don't know, like, incidents in the community? Do we see better outcomes for the community that could point to a justification for budgets?
Can I go?
Yes, you may.
So, in almost every other function of government, we can look at a return on investment, and you would be able to say, like, reduced incidences in the community, or more tickets that are written. You know, but when you look at public safety, not just in Franklin, in anywhere, that's not an effective measurement. Because in reality, if your police are doing a fabulous job, what the output is probably less. They're writing less tickets because people aren't speeding. They're, you know, responding to less crime. So it can be really difficult to measure it on an output. That's something that we would see reflected in our police, the report that they give every month, right? It's really hard to track that down to an output of where that investment is. What you would want to do, one of the areas that you could is, go really closely, do a deep dive into your overtime and your personnel and look at that. Now, we're looking at this at a high level, right? And I have just rough estimates of your percentage of change here. But without the extra officers, anticipating and, you know, calculating how much overtime would have accrued, that would be one measurement, not the only measurement of where, you know, there could be a cost savings in there, but definitely a critical one. The other thing is to Angelina's point, turnover is one of the most expensive costs that any organization can face. And so having more invested, reliable, full-time officers over here is significantly less turnover. So over the course of their employment here, you could look and see what the average cost is to bring on a new officer, onboard them, equip them with all the equipment, fit them into the schedule, do all of that. You know, there's definitely a cost associated there. When we were having these part-time positions, one, those turn over a lot faster. Two, they were harder to fill. What we have been fortunate to do is when we converted these full-time positions, we were able, in large part to Chief and officers that he's known throughout his career, able to bring over some quality officers over here who are invested, who we have no reason to believe wouldn't be here for a long term, and really build on the retention that we have of that department. So if you were going to estimate dollars and numbers, that would be another area that you would look at for that.
I've mentioned this before, and it becomes more and more true each day. Other departments are trying to poach our people. I just sent an officer over to Macomb County for a evidence tech school, and 3 different departments approached him about leaving here. So, and that is kind of reflective of I know we're not talking about the contracts today, but really I think Meg and I spent a lot of time, and Meg did a really nice job with that contract, because it really put us in the middle of the pack and made us at least competitive. And you have a young group of officers that truly, there's a lot of value there, and they want to be here. So I would just encourage you to, you know, keep that in mind. At the end of the day, you're the bosses, and we'll do what you want. But you've got a good thing going here, and like I said, I think this is a pretty responsible budget. The overtime, something to think about with the overtime is that because I put so much emphasis on training with the officers, a lot of times I do have to backfill on overtime to make sure there's coverage on the road.
Okay, so a couple of things. I will be interested if we could get a breakdown of just like the aggregated budgets through these years that are reflected. That'd be helpful, because as we have this conversation, well, one, as I look through the numbers, I see a lot more increases than I see decreases. And so I'm just wondering where we land at 5%. Not that, certainly, I'm not saying that we won't. But just, I think being able to see it will be easier. The other thing is that as I look at a budget and I see that if we're at 5% from where we were the previous year, and the previous year is not far off of 5%, like that's a very reasonable and an indication that you're doing cost benefit, right? You're what you're prioritizing for your staff, you're also subtracting elsewhere in the budget to offset that. I think you had previously talked about training being an emphasis, and that's reflected in the budget. There's an increase in training, but I'm sure that was something that you were mindful of to kind of do subtractions elsewhere in the budget. One thing that I did notice is, again, if we look at a reflection of the 2020, I have 2 questions coming out of this, but 2022 to 2023 for salaries to then 2025, 2026, it looks like it's about a 30% increase. However, is there, I would imagine that also accounts for an increase in full-time salary, because the part-time probably were not accounted for as salaried. Is
Yeah,
that true?
I believe it was a different budget line
It
for
was.
part-time people, yes.
Okay, so that makes sense. Do we know, and this is an impossibility to really give me a direct, but if we had a new officer, how much would that cost? The reason that
I
I'm
would have to
wondering
break
is,
down the numbers. I think to get a new officer here, you're probably gonna have to start them at top pay. Everyone right now is at top pay within the police department, but I think if you bring in another officer, especially an officer with experience, and really the sweet zone for me is 5 or 6 years experience somewhere else and bringing them over here, you're gonna be at top pay, plus benefits,
okay,
overtime.
What would that top salary amount be? Sorry, are you
and it
asking-
can, yeah,
are you
that
asking
that
like
is,
total
Like
cost
roughly,
or-
I can
Yeah,
give you
rough,
like
rough,
a rough
very
idea
rough,
off the top of
extremely
our
rough.
head is about, yeah, like, well, that's not what our officers are making
No,
at
but if
top
you-
pay.
no, I'm just,
Including benefits?
Yeah.
Upwards of $150,000, probably more like $175,000 when you break down all the benefits and then the pension obligations that we would have
Yeah.
on there. Now, it's not salary, of course.
right,
Top pay for our officers just roughly is $89,000 to $90,000. Is
Yeah,
that where
with-
we're
With the new
at?
contract we were
But that's not
discussing-
with benefits, just
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
salary.
we're in the high 80s.
okay,
And that brought us to midpoint throughout of Oakland County.
yeah,
So, I have kind of some totals for the last few years, and I can get you guys all this information as it pertains to the PD budget. Interesting, where we saw the largest increase was between, 22, 23, and 23, 24. You went from having a total police budget in 22, 23 from about $2.1 million. And then you go to 23, 24, and your total police budget jumps to $2.8 million. Then you go back down last year, so I'd have to get you the exact, but it's around like 2.5. And then my numbers this year are bringing us in at about 2.65.
real quick, just on that big jump that happened in
Yeah.
2022 to 20, did we do a lump sum into pension payment,
Yes.
right?
But that, we can see, I looked at that, so you can see that, let me grab your budget on which line item you have it here. It was almost $500,000 that was awarded.
Yeah.
It was a state grant program, and those funds allowed us to increase our retirement, contributions and, oh, unplug the speaker. And I think that was, I'm just gonna close out
Yeah,
of
it's on the,
this
yeah, you're
Zoom.
good, you're good. It's
Okay.
on the second page, third
Mike
in
is
green.
with us now. Yeah, so you can see it, that there, second page. And that would have changed the overall budget. We looked at that to try and help explain. Correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't 22, 23 a negotiation year? It was a 2-year contract.
Oh, 2-year.
That one was a 2-year contract.
Could've been.
Because negotiation years are, obviously, you see increases there as well.
Mike's on, it looks like.
Yeah, I think Mike has joined us here. Let me try and get the speaker working here. We can hear you. It's just quiet. Let's- Okay. Yeah.
Just so he can see, because that is exactly what you said.
Yep.
No one's speaking right now. Nobody was saying anything.
Can you hear us, Mike?
Oh, he can't. So he can't hear us, Meg. Oh,
It's giving us too much feedback.
giving us reverb.
Can we turn, oh, this is for the videotaping.
Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing that I can do about the sound on that. This is giving us too much feedback here.
And it's being recorded, but it's not live.
Correct.
Can he submit his questions? In the chat,
Uh,
or make comment?
We can't hear us.
Oh, he can't hear us.
No.
Let's log off and log back on. We can continue the conversation. Let me work on this Zoom.
Just real quickly, to trustee Sally's point, I just shared with Meg, I have an activity report from the last 4 years, so all of council saw this, but just so that if you have questions, trustee Sally, you don't have to come back to the chief, so I'm just gonna pass this down, just so you know.
Recording in progress.
But that was as of 12/31/24, so those numbers for this year aren't complete.
Are we still on the question of when the pension funding came in? Is that what we're still looking for?
No, because I think, my point being is that, yes, there was a spike in 2022, 3 to 2024, but that is, if you remove the $500,000
Right.
in contribution, then that would put it at 2.3, which is roughly where we've been doing that steady increase.
Yes. So when I look at this as a whole and comprehensively, you do see continued steadied increases. Other than the large jump that we have when we have all the pension funding, the increase is pretty consistent and across the board there. Costs are continuing to rise, and I would expect to see similar increases in the budget as a whole for the village too. I would be curious to see where those are. We all know that costs are continuing to increase there, so.
This is a question for Chief. Just, I know that one of the revenues, very limited revenue, is forfeiture. Are there any other revenue streams for police departments or no?
So, once a year, we do sell a police vehicle, which brings us
Oh.
anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000. In this upcoming budget year, we will not be selling a police car. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go from 4 patrol vehicles to 5. And one of the reasons is that when we switch over the cars, we have to take 2 cars out of service, basically to get the new car. So we're down to 2 cars. And then those 2 cars are being driven for weeks, 24/7. And I think when we have, Labor Day and we have different events, I would like to have an additional